According to the NamUs database, around 600,000 people go missing on an annual basis. While the percentage of people who are not found may seem low at 1%, that 1% counts for 6,000 individuals. Number 5. On the 10th of July, 2021, Charles Lyon from Tyler, Texas, was seen at the Best Western in Tucson, Arizona. This would be the last established time that the 49-year-old man would be seen. Lyon had disappeared within the Grand Canyon National Park. He was believed to have been traveling alone, and his vehicle was later found abandoned on the South Rim along Desert View Drive, close to Lipan Point the following day, according to National Park rangers as searches began to be carried out. It's not known what the individual had been wearing at the time of his disappearance, or what gear he had been carrying with him. A full-blown search and rescue was carried out with the use of rescue crews and helicopters, but to no avail. Evidence relating to his disappearance was weak and didn't bring up any leads. The search for Lyon pressed on for several weeks until the efforts began to slow down and encouraged community outreach programs to assist in finding the missing man. It was stated by the National Park Service, or the NPS, that they would be scaling down the search. During this time, the search for Lyon was carried out in limited and continuous mode after 3 months of extensive searches. Efforts such as back-county patrols and helicopter flights were due to be scheduled. Charles Lyon is said to be 6 feet and 3 inches tall and weighs around 177 pounds. He's described as having brown hair and eyes. The rangers of the Grand Canyon ask that if anyone has seen or spoken to Charles Lyon, that they're encouraged to phone or message the NPS Investigative Services Branch on 888-653-0009. Tips may also be submitted at nps.gov/ISB, and emails can be sent to nps_ISB@nps.gov. According to the Arizona Daily Sun, over 600 people lost their lives at the Grand Canyon National Park. This is often caused by the individuals going missing and then falling victim to environmental factors. There's since been no further information since the discovery of the missing individual's vehicle. The hotel that Lyon had stayed at was within the Grand Canyon National Park, which is close to Long Jim Loop campsite. There are 130 famous or often used trails in the national park. The South Kaibab Trail to U'a Point is a length of 2.9 kilometers, and the Cedar Ridge is 5 kilometers. The Bright Angel Trail goes on for over 24 kilometers. These are only a fraction of the vastness that one may find at the Grand Canyon. This makes finding one individual a rather difficult task. There are numerous mysterious disappearances that take place in these national forests and the wilderness spread across America. In some instances, 1 or 2 items belonging to a missing individual are found somewhere in the forest or national park, but that person remains missing and no other trace of them ever seems to come up. Some of these disappearances can have an almost simple explanation, ranging from avalanches to hypothermia or falling off the edges of cliffs and getting wedged between gaps in the rocks. Such mysteries have since grabbed the attention of a journalist named John Billman. Billman has become rather fascinated with the cases that seem to defy logic, where the individuals suddenly vanish without a trace. These incidents, according to him, happen a lot closer to the average US citizen than one might think. The circumstances surrounding the disappearance of these individuals in the wilderness sometimes appear unclear. The Department of the Interior, which oversees the National Park Service, and the Department of Agriculture's U.S. Forest Service do not seem to keep track of this statistic. Strangely enough, some of the most reliable information comes from Bigfoot hunters. The founder of the North American Bigfoot Search, David Paulides, has created a database of wild disappearances which had taken place under mysterious circumstances. Based on Paulides' research, there are around 1,600 people that are currently missing, somewhere in the wild of the United States. According to what the man uncovered, most people seem to disappear in these places during the late afternoon or during severe weather. He discovered that the remains of some missing individuals would be found in areas that had already been searched, and sometimes they would be unclothed or without footwear, even though hypothermia was ruled out. The last symptom of hypothermia is the individual feeling hot and overheated. Another discovery that Paulides made was that children are often found improbably far away from the area where they had gone missing. One of the biggest obstacles, based on what Paulides had found, was access to information through the National Park Service red tape. It's suspected that the Park Service may be concealing some data as to how an individual had gone missing, and is falsifying the number of missing people that have been found. Billman, the journalist, explained that he doesn't think that there's some grand conspiracy that keeps the number a secret, but the Park Service certainly doesn't want to advertise that many people are still missing, with most of them being linked to Yosemite and the Grand Canyon. Furthermore, there's a lack of information on the individuals that are still missing, making it difficult to build up much data to aid in finding that person. Billman expressed that these national parks appear to operate as sovereign states. If someone is to go missing within the territory of the park, they don't seek help from outside government agencies. He furthered this by saying that there's a pride and ego at stake as well as budgets. Search and rescue often don't yield sufficient results. An example of this occurred in 2017 when Kara Moore disappeared. An operation was carried out where 73,000 acres were covered with the help of canines, but nothing was found. 1 week later, Moore managed to stumble home all by herself. The father of another missing individual, Randy Gray, followed every possible lead from psychics to an eerie clue of 4 arrows stuck in a specifically placed line on the ground near the missing individual, Jacob's campsite. Gray had taken it all rather seriously, and his son learned that the 12 Tribes cult had been recruiting new members. Gray had eventually become involved with Bigfoot research. Both Gray and Randy had been welcomed to the Bigfoot barn where they had all kinds of maps and supplies. This group of people was able to offer Gray and Billman knowledge of the region and area. These people had even volunteered to hike for hundreds of hours in search of Gray's son. His remains were discovered. Even though the Park Service and rescue team had searched extensively for Jacob, it was the Bigfoot organization that led to his discovery. It's situations such as these that lead Billman and Paulides to believe that there's more to the stories of the disappearance that occur in these national parks than the Park Service is letting on. It's the unsolved missing people cases such as that, with Charles Lyon and many others, that should provoke new approaches to national park safety, security, and rescue situations. Families, friends, and the national parks hold on to hope of one day finding these missing individuals, especially those that have happened a lot more recently, which may have a better outcome. Number 4. A 68-year-old Columbia Falls resident named Barry Joel Tran disappeared from Flathead County, Montana. He was last seen on the 22nd of July in 2020. Tran's vehicle was discovered at Kintla Lake in the northwest area of Glacier National Park. The search for Tran did not start until a few days after, on the 25th of July. This was initiated by the staff after the man had not returned his vehicle. From there, more extensive searches began, which involved ground search teams, canine units, aerial searches, and water observations using boats as well as underwater vehicles. The following month, on the 4th of August, a pair of sunglasses had been found that belonged to the missing man. These were found in Kintla Creek. After this, more canines were brought in and appeared to show an interest at the outlet of the lake. The remotely operated underwater vehicle was used, but there was no trace of Tran in the water or the surrounding area. The incident commander, Jim Dahlstrom, stated that all available clues had been investigated thoroughly, and all the resources had been depleted in the search efforts for Tran. A few organizations are involved in the search for the missing man. This includes the Flathead County Sheriff's Office, Two Bear Air, Flathead County Search and Rescue, National Park Service Investigative Services, and the FBI, which has also been assisting Glacier National Park in the search for Tran. Not long after the search efforts began, the park had announced that they would be scaling the search for the Columbia Falls man down after so many efforts had been exercised. This transitioned into a limited continuous state, with the case remaining open, but active field work would be limited. Barry Tran is said to be 5 feet and 10 inches tall and weighs around 220 pounds. He has gray hair and hazel eyes and was born on the 17th of October in 1951. Anyone who may have any information regarding this missing individual is encouraged to contact the park's tip line on 406-888-7077. The Glacier National Park is said to be a hiker's paradise, which covers 1 million acres of land. There's said to be 25 active glaciers that move around due to thawing and melting. There are a few popular areas in this national park, including Kintla Lake, Triple Divide Peak, and Going to the Sun Road, which is a 50-mile trek. There are a number of trails that Tragan could have taken around Kintla Lake. These include the over 18-kilometer trail called Numa Lookout, and the 43.5-kilometer Brown Pass Trail. Quartz Lake Loop is 21 kilometers, with Bowman Lakehead just over that distance. Then there's Hidden Mountain Trail, which is 4 kilometers, and a much harder path of 38 kilometers of the Upper Kintla Lake. Goat Haunt Ferry, Covey Meadow, and many others make up the numerous trails in this particular area. It's not been confirmed as to which trail the glasses belonging to Tragan were found on, or where the car had been parked. It's also uncertain as to where Tragan had been staying during his trip, but there are a few accommodations in the national park that he may have stayed at, and most likely somewhere around Kintla Lake. Efforts for the missing individual are still being stressed when the park receives a tip from the public. Unfortunately, the man appeared to disappear entirely and no trace of him is yet to be found. The only indicator was that of the canines showing a particular interest in the outlet of the lake, around the area where the glasses were discovered as well. It's not been disclosed if the authorities do suspect that foul play was involved in the case. The circumstances surrounding the disappearance do seem rather suspicious, though. While there's only very little information surrounding this unsolved missing person case, the parks and families are relying on information from the public in tracking this individual down. Another individual made the point of explaining that so many missing people are found in prison after being arrested for one thing or another. Even though these individuals disappeared within forests and parks, they may have been taken into custody for some kind of reason where they were incapable of contacting family or friends. It's also been found that missing people sometimes may be recruited into cults or organizations and purposefully never return. A situation such as this would leave behind very little information. With such a small amount of evidence to go on, the time slot for these individuals slowly starts to close. If you happen to come across any individual who you know to be a missing person, you're always urged to make contact with the local authorities. Sometimes even the best search and rescue operations can't compete with the public eye, or even parental instincts. Whether the disappearances relate to Bigfoot or mountain lions, caverns, or simply getting lost in thick wooded areas, these individuals need to be found, and every resource should be stressed to do so. Number 3. Born on the 26th of October in 1946, 71-year-old John Paul Squires disappeared while river rafting on the 20th of June, 2018. Squires was last seen on his river rafting mission on the American Creek in Katmai National Park. He was accompanied by others on board until they were hit by a sweeper, which sent him and others into the creek. He was seen swimming downriver, nearing the shoreline. It's uncertain if he got to the shoreline, but he disappeared within that moment. It was stated that he was wearing a brown vest and Great Patagonia waders, along with river sandals. Unfortunately, he had not been wearing a flotation device when the incident occurred. John Squires is said to be a Californian man from Sacramento, and searches were conducted by land, air, and raft in an attempt to find him. The state and federal authorities later stopped the search for the man after numerous resources were stressed. Park Service Rangers, Alaska State Troopers, Coast Guard, as well as numerous volunteers all aided in the searches. Squires' case remains an open investigation, but no new leads are said to have been revealed as of yet. Squires is said to have been one of 3 individuals in the same raft. The other 2 men were found safe after they'd swam to the opposite shores. It's been expressed that the river was running high during their rafting due to recent storms that had occurred in the area. The raft had hit a sweeper and flipped. The 2 men who were found safely had managed to find campers after they'd been walking for hours. Although one theory is that Squires had been pulled underwater, he's still never been recovered and remains a missing person. Squires is said to be 5 feet and 8 inches tall and weighs around 195 pounds. He has brown hair and blue eyes and a tattoo on his left forearm that's of a wilderness scene consisting of mountains, a river, and a flying raven. The National Park Service encourages anyone with information on this individual's whereabouts to contact 907-246-2103. The case reference number is NP 1808-6962. The Alaska State Troopers are an additional source and can be contacted on 907-352-5401 with the reference AK180-4012. For many years, these friends had made the annual trip to Alaska from California, where they would go on to fish or river raft. The 3 friends were John Squires and his friends August and Randy. Upon entering the area, they found that it was much louder than they had anticipated, but were so excited to be there that the warning signs didn't penetrate their minds. The 3 friends had begun to unpack their gear and inflated their NRS raft, which had belonged to Squires. He's said to be a retired court reporter from Lodi. All of the men had experience with big Alaskan rivers, but Squires at this point was the most knowledgeable. This meant that he would take the lead on the 6-day float. At the time, Squires was 71 years old, while August was 76 and Randy was 68. The 3 men had all worn Gore-Tex waders and puffy jackets. There was a lot to do, and they'd managed to catch a window between storm fronts. More severe weather was also due to blow in. It took all of the men to lug the rafts hundreds of yards to the river, and soon they were able to shove off into the water. A current had managed to grab a hold of the raft, while Squires confidently took charge of the oars. The river that they'd been rafting in was locally known as the American. The river is said to wind 40 miles through the tundra and drops over 1,000 feet from the headwaters of Hammersley Lake to Lake Covell. The American Creek is said to be a lot larger than the name may suggest, and is subject to drastic changes during the season and effects of the weather. During the month of August, the water would be too low to float, but during June, the waters would be suitable in Katmai. The local guides know that trying to raft the American too early could be rather dangerous. With snowmelt and storms blowing in, the river swells to dangerous levels, and the channels that were open in the previous season would now be blocked up with logs and debris. Squires and his friends would be the second group to float the American that season. 3 days prior, a professional guide and 2 clients had floated the creek and were camping somewhere below. The plan for Squires was to travel around 6 river miles each day, with the first day being the shortest, with only a few miles afloat. They would stop to fish and then set up their camp. Unfortunately, the first float didn't go as planned. Before embarking on their journey to Alaska, the men had done some research and conversed with local guides, and this is what had brought up the expectation of a moderate water flow. Before their arrival, though, there had been some storms for almost a week. As soon as they hit the water, August had thought that they didn't belong there, but had kept this to himself. It was found that there were no exposed gravel bars that were supposed to be there. The current was relentless throughout the river. The 3 were luckily warned about some large mid-river boulders, which were usually visible. At this point, it was impossible for them to stop and rest, and they had pulled off the river twice to find a camping spot. The banks were overrun, and the areas had been swamped with water, so they had to press on. Squires had been on the oars for around 5 hours in a battle against water and rock, while his arms grew increasingly tired. After 4 p.m., the raft had been washed into a left turn. The river began to narrow and the water grew stronger and funneled them towards a mass of wood. The 3 had yelled "sweeper" all at once. Squires had angled the raft as quickly as possible, but it was unavoidable. August had been the first one to go overboard after a large branch had swept him off the seat. Squires was the next to go after his oar became wedged. It began to swing violently and ultimately knocked him into the water. August managed to grab hold of a boulder and pulled himself to shore. Randy was still in the raft and scrambled for the oars. He and Squires shouted back and forth while he tried to swim to shore. Neither one was able to hear each other over the sound of the gushing river. Randy was then thrown overboard, but was able to grab a hold of a branch and pull himself to shore. August and Randy were on either side of the river, separated by nearly a mile. They had begun the early stages of hypothermia and were in an area that had the highest concentration of brown bears. Neither man had any way to start a fire, and neither of them had eyes on Squire. The two men had made the decision to go downstream, where they believed their friends, food, and raft gear were somewhere below. August had stopped to fire a round from his weapon, but Randy couldn't hear this due to the sound of the American. After hours of walking, the two men had suddenly spotted each other from across the river. August had mouthed the question, "Where's John?" and Randy shrugged. There were others who had been in the area, one of which was Mike Grosser, and his client John Drawbert. On the 20th of June, the two had exited their tents to find August standing there soaking wet and bruised. He pointed up to the far bank where Randy sat, shivering. The National Park Service was contacted, and a journey to reach Randy ensued. He was instructed to go downstream to make it easier for them to get to him. Once he was rescued, a camp was set up while they awaited a rescue helicopter. The Park Service assessed the situation and determined that the two were fit enough to float 30 miles to safety. The helicopter would remain behind to search for Squires. A ranger had arrived at the area where Squires was last seen, but there was nothing there and no sign of the missing man. For the next 5 days after this, planes were in the air in search for Squires, but to no avail. Number 2. At least once every year, a hiker or rafter will go missing in one of America's 419 national parks. The Investigative Services Branch, ISB, along with federal law enforcement, acts quickly to attempt to solve each case. Occasionally, though, some of these individuals are never found, and all that's left is mystery. The cases soon grow cold, and although they may become inactive, the cases remain open by the ISB. The ISB spokesperson, Kathy Cupper, explained that the cases are always there on the table. She explains that there are 30 agents covering all 419 sites across the nation. The cases will be inactive until new information arises in order to conserve resources that would otherwise be stressed. Cupper stated that sometimes a tip will come through and the case will become active. One such example is that of the oldest cases of the missing park ranger, Paul Fugate, who has recently received some new activity after an increase in the reward money. Often, hikers go missing in the Grand Canyon due to its vastness. One such individual was Jang-Hyun Won. The 45-year-old Asian male was said to be in the Grand Canyon on the 17th of September in 2017 and has not been seen or heard from since. It's believed that Won did not have any known plans to be in the area at the time, and his whereabouts are now unknown. Wong's vehicle, a white Toyota Camry of Los Angeles, was found at Moran Point, on the south rim of the national park on the same day of his disappearance. It had been previously spotted close to the New Hants trailhead. Won was born in 1972, and he's said to be 5 feet and 7 inches tall, and weighed around 121 pounds, and had brown eyes and black hair. There's not a lot of information surrounding Won's disappearance, and one Reddit user took to finding his Facebook profile. There, they discovered only 2 images from 2016, one of which was an image of Won. It's encouraged that should anyone have any information regarding Won, they're asked to contact the tip line on 888-653-0009. Jang-Hyun Won is among 5 other individuals who have gone missing in the Grand Canyon and are yet to be found. Among those are Floyd E. Roberts III, Adam Clayton Lyle Jones, Morgan Heimer, and Drake Kramer. The Grand Canyon National Park, as well as many other national parks in America, has a lot of cold cases tied to them after people are reported missing while they're in the park. Families and friends have reported individuals vanishing when their return is overdue or when their vehicles are discovered near trailheads and their owner is unknown. After reports are made, search and rescue teams will be launched to extensively search the grounds. Often, aerial rescue is also used to spot any individual from above. If nothing is found during the searches that are carried out within a few days, then the investigation is scaled down and placed in a limited continuous mode. This means that the case is still open but not active until new information comes to the surface. The unsolved cases of the Grand Canyon National Park are mostly in this mode at the moment, while the investigators and rangers await new information. It was stated that the Yosemite National Park ranks at the top of the ISB cold case list, with 10 unsolved cases generated from there. This is then followed by the Great Smoky Mountains National Park and the Grand Canyon National Park, with 5 unsolved cases each, including that of Zhang Wan. 2 of the missing individuals who are named, along with Wan, are said to have disappeared on river trips or while hiking, and another 2 are said to involve abandoned cars, which includes Wan, as his car had been discovered. The Grand Canyon National Park's size is made up of 1,218,375 acres. At the south rim, elevations may rise to around 7,000 feet, and at the north rim, they'll rise to 8,000 feet. The Colorado River also runs through the park and is said to be a length of 278 miles, along with an average width of 300 feet and a depth of 40 feet. Trying to find missing individuals in the Grand Canyon National Park is like searching for a needle in a haystack. Many individuals have lost their lives within the Grand Canyon, and it's said to have one of the highest reports of this out of all national parks in the area. This is also the only national park to have a year-round helicopter on site. Around 56 individuals have been reported missing from the Grand Canyon since 2018. 5 of them, as previously mentioned, remain open cases. It was found that the peak time of visitations to the Grand Canyon is during the summer months. Visitors come to the desert in this national park during the hottest time of the year. The rescues in the park are also said to be incredibly difficult given the terrain. This is why the helicopter is stationed there throughout the year. There is hope that new information comes in regarding any of these individuals, including Juan, and that they may be found at some point in time. There are extensive efforts being carried out to find all the individuals who go missing, and most of them are eventually found. Number 1. Kieran Burke was the age of 44 when he disappeared from the Yosemite National Park in April of 2000. He had traveled alone to San Francisco for a 2-week-long holiday. Burke had traveled from Dublin to the national park and was one of the 13 who had vanished here and were never seen again. Burke had booked a room close to the park between the 4th and 6th of April. He'd been last seen at 10 in the morning in the Yosemite Valley at Curry Village on the 5th of April. The car he had been renting had soon been found abandoned or unattended in the parking lot of Curry Village. The staff of the national park alerted authorities when Burke had failed to check out of the area that he was staying at on the 6th of April. The missing Dublin native is said to be 6 feet tall and weighs around 180 pounds. It was found that he'd left the accommodation for a daytime hike on the 5th of April. At the time of his disappearance, Burke had been wearing a brown leather jacket and is said to have been an experienced hiker and photographer. His family stated that the man had hiked previously in the Himalayas. A search and rescue team had combed the vast national park for the man for weeks after he had disappeared. He's further detailed as having thinning black ear-length hair and blue eyes. Additionally, there are dental x-rays available. Kieran Burke's brother, Lorcan, had joined the search after flying from San Francisco. A spokesperson who was speaking for the park had told reporters that there were over 800 miles of trails in the park, and that it would be almost impossible to find Dirk without the assistance of the public. They called for anyone who may have accidentally gotten images or photographs of the missing individual while photographing the scene. The public was encouraged to come and aid in the search. Unfortunately, no credible information had ever turned up that could lead to the recovery of the missing hiker. Burke remains a missing person to this day. Authorities stated that they believe the missing man may have gotten lost or injured while walking the trails of the vast national park. The Yosemite National Park is said to be at least 750,000 acres. Among the missing individuals, there was also 31-year-old Joel Tran, Richard Judd, a 72-year-old, and 50 years ago, a 21-year-old medical student disappeared after he asked for directions to Half Dome on the 24th of July in 1972. Kieran Burke is described as a rather adventurous individual. No clues have since surfaced regarding this missing individual. Anyone who may have any information regarding him and his whereabouts is encouraged to contact the park investigators on 209-372-0361. You can alternatively speak to the park dispatch on 209-372-0214. Burke's case number is 000537. It's also been relayed that the Irish citizen may have been carrying a camera along with him during the hiking trip. He would now be the age of 68 years old. It was also brought to attention that Burke was wearing a leather jacket, which would be strange if he was planning on going hiking. It had been warm and sunny on the day of his disappearance. This furthers the mystery surrounding his disappearance. Later in the week, there had been storms that brought along snow and rain that only hindered the search efforts. Some believe that he became lost on a walk, and others think he was kidnapped, shoved in a car, and taken elsewhere. The search for the missing individual also only started a few days later. He had vanished over a week before the searches began. According to a spokesperson, Christine Cowles, Burke's possessions were also still in his tent. She had also stated the possibilities of where Burke ended up are absolutely endless. Cowles also stated that an experienced hiker would be able to survive in the wilderness for a certain amount of time, but as time pressed on, the chances grew slimmer and darker. Based on statistics, the Yosemite National Park is said to have one of the highest missing people cases out of all parks in North America. Yosemite National Park and Oregon's Crater Lake have the most missing people cases linked to them. While Yosemite may not be the highest one of all, there have been 30 missing people cases that have dated back to 1909. It's stated that when hiking in the Yosemite National Park, one should be careful of waterfalls, slick hiking trails, ledges, as well as cliffs with steep drop-offs. It's said that hikers must remain on the marked trails to avoid getting lost or putting themselves in a hazardous situation. A map of the park should always be carried, and you should always inform someone exactly where you're going in case you get lost, and this will greatly heighten the chance of you being found. The Yosemite National Park may be home to various animals. There have been concerns about brown bears or grizzly bears being present there, and if a visitor spots a bear, it would likely be a black bear. According to NamUs, over 600,000 individuals go missing in the United States, and 89 to 92% of those individuals are found each year. According to law enforcement, due to the receding glaciers, more and more missing mountaineers are beginning to turn up, even those who were reported missing decades ago. Along with Burke, and among some of the most recent disappearances in this particular national park, there are Joel Thomason, Peter Jackson, Sandra Johnson Hughes, and many others. If anyone is to come across these missing individuals, they're encouraged to contact the Yosemite Search and Rescue on 209-238-7046. You can also email yosemite.search.rescue@gmail.com. The Yosemite National Park consists of 750,000 acres of cliffs, cascading waterfalls, and meadows. There are 360 miles of paved roadways, 800 miles of developed trails, and 1,445 campsites. There are a lot of grounds that are to be searched to find one missing individual, with 94% of the park being designated wilderness. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you liked this video, be sure to hit that like button. Also, don't forget to subscribe and click that notification bell to keep up to date with all of our future uploads. But my name is Ty Knotts, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.